All right, welcome to a podcast that we're going to name by the end of the podcast. We're going to come up with a name. We don't know what the name is yet. But it is a podcast about True Detective Season 2.
Right.
Kind of a recap and discussion analysis podcast.
Sure.
Hopefully funny.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
All of those things.
I'm Kevin Mullaney.
And I'm Will Meinen.
And we may or may not have guests as the season goes along. But this first podcast is just going to be the two of us talking about...
I think we need to nail down this dynamic before we expand.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, we got to figure out... Well, we have to sort of figure out how we're going to attack the show.
Sure.
Because we
will
meant
attack our personal relationship. That you and I
you're more worried about our relationship?
Yeah.
That's true. I suppose
the rest of it will come together, Kevin.
Okay. I trust you, Will.
All right, good.
So let's do some basics about the episode, and then we'll jump in.
Right. So episode 1, titled Western Book of the Dead, written by Nick Pizzolatto, who's also the creator of the show, directed by Justin Lin, who will be one of 2 directors for this season.
I think there's going to be a lot of directors.
Is there?
Yeah.
I feel like you said to me before we started, Justin Lin
he's going to do 2
2
episodes.
Oh,
he's just going to do 2 episodes. And then a lot of other people are just doing 1. In fact, I don't think they've released the names of all the directors.
All right. For a second there, I thought you were sabotaging me for the purpose, like
giving
in this podcast, like you'd feed me false information, and then I would look like the dope of the 2 of us, and then the dynamic would be that you correct me.
That's not intended, but it may end up being the dynamic.
All right.
So what did you think of the title, just before we dive into this? It seemed a little...
Well, I mean, it's
overtitled.
It immediately conjured the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Egyptian Book of the Dead.
On purpose, I think.
Yes, obviously. So these are texts that have ancient texts that have been used to help people pass from this side of reality to the next.
Do you think that had any relation to the episode?
Well, I mean, we do have the impetus for our main characters coming together in the form of the death of Casper, the city manager.
Sure.
Exactly why the Book of the Dead, then simply because someone has died.
I mean, I think we'll come back to this because I think there's a lot of details in the episode that are that beg you to sort of go and investigate and try and figure out why this is named that
exactly.
But
there's a lot of things which as I'm watching it, I don't know are simply red herrings or breadcrumbs.
Right. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how we're going to talk about the episodes.
Okay.
So we feel we have different ideas about how to go through each episode.
We do.
Well, why don't you give your theory, and then I don't know if I disagree with it that much, but
you mean in terms of how to approach this?
Yeah, that we're not going to approach it scene by scene necessarily.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We're going to.
I feel like we're letting people into the kitchen at this point.
You think we should just dive right into it?
I think we should just dive right in.
Well, the first thing...
Our differences will become obvious.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the 2... Or we're going to talk about it, start by talking about some of the characters.
Sure.
So we have kind of 4 main characters.
Right.
And I think the first one we're going to talk about is the one played by Rachel McAdams.
Right. Annie Bezarides.
Right.
We think we're saying that last name correctly. Right. Because no character said her last name as far as I know.
I can't remember
during the episode.
Someone calling her by her last name.
And she's law enforcement. She works for the Sheriff's Department. From what I can tell.
The first time we see her, she's with presumably a boyfriend or a lover.
Right. Yeah. And then they proceed to have this incredibly cryptic discussion about what they had just done in the bedroom.
Right.
Is that what you understood it to be?
Right. Yeah.
He's asking, do you usually do that? Do you like doing that?
I think the implication is she was kinky.
Right.
She was trying something kind of kinky on him.
Right.
And he was asking, he was surprised by it and
wanted further exploration of this particular experience in the bedroom.
But it's very vague.
Very vague.
What it is.
I felt like it was unnecessarily vague, given how forward the rest of the show is about sex, sexual violence, and violence in general.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and... don't make me speculate.
Maybe they didn't want the first image of her to be her doing some kinky sex thing.
Right, perhaps. I guess if that was the case, then you could have started with.
Of course, they did have the first image of her being her in her underpants. So
right, yeah.
Anyway, but she comes off. How would you describe her character from that first scene?
Brusque, tough.
Yeah,
right. She's
sort of the one in control of that relationship, whatever it is.
Yeah, guarded.
Yeah, doesn't want to talk about things.
Right. Either incapable of or uninterested in emotional intimacy. Perhaps.
Yeah, kind of like all the characters, the cop characters seem to share these same qualities.
Right, absolutely.
And it's almost like he's sort of setting up, she's a female cop, but she's just like all the male cops.
Right,
That's it's okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Which, I read, so her name is Annie, but her father, later in the episode, calls her Antigone.
Right.
Which is the title of a Greek tragedy.
With a character by the same name.
Right, exactly. And if you read the character description of Antigone, I haven't actually read the play. Have you?
I haven't read the play, no.
No, either have I. I've read some other Sophocles, just so anyone who might listen to this doesn't think that we're entirely uneducated. I've read the Oedipal tragedies, which are Sophocles.
I'm familiar. I recognize it.
Okay, yeah.
And I read the wiki page after the
right,
episode.
as did I. And so the description of Antigone is consistent, I think, with.
She's somebody. Antigone does the right thing in spite of the decree of the king, right?
Correct. Yeah.
She buries her family member,
right,
in defiance of the king,
right,
who's also her father, right?
Precisely. Yep.
So anyway, and I would say of the characters, she seems to be the most likely character to do the right thing, whatever that means. Once
not that standard has been set very high.
No. All the characters are fairly gray, for certain. So the next thing we see her do is they're busting a house that they think may be prostitution.
Yeah, or sex trafficking or something awful.
And it looks kind of seedy, but then it's just people doing webcams. It's just women doing webcams.
Right.
Which they seem disappointed, but they seem still... I guess we should talk about what the real point of that scene, which is the sister.
Yes, right, yeah.
So her sister, whose name is Athena...
Right.
Is
another Greek name.
Another Greek name. There's a lot of Greek.
There's a lot of Greek references. I don't know why her name isn't. Well, I don't know why she gets the name of a goddess. I mean, there's sisters of Antigone.
Yeah, there's a sister in the play. Like, if he was going for that,
right? Why not be consistent? And if you're going to map for them like predetermined character traits for your children, I mean, make them both mortals and people that are pitted against one another.
Right. So they have this. She has this confrontation with her sister. Now she didn't know her sister was there. Is that
correct?
What you got? It was a total surprise that her sister was there.
Yeah.
Which also seems like a crazy coincidence.
Yes.
Yeah. Not that. I don't know if that's the craziest coincidence of the episode, but seems like absurd.
It's convenient.
It's very convenient for character development.
For plot. Yeah.
Apparently her sister's a drug addict, and this is just par for the course. And
right. Although she intimates that she would prefer that perhaps she start doing drugs again.
The cop says to her sister.
Right. Go back on heroin.
This interaction was very weird. I thought this interaction was very strange.
It was very strange.
I did not get... part of me was sort of like, why... I don't know. This may sound strange, but I feel like it's common for TV shows and film to portray the sex industry much more negatively than it probably is in real life.
Right.
Like I would think that most,
assuming some basic preconditions, right? That people are there on their own will.
Sure.
That they're being compensated for their time and labor and not being treated terribly in the process, right? So given those preconditions...
Which seems to be the case in this situation.
It does, absolutely.
But they still portray it as like, this thing done in a secluded farmhouse miles away from anywhere else. And that the rooms are separated by a sheet, and it's just really. I didn't understand. It just
right. Yeah. It was all rather mechanical.
It seemed like they wanted to show us prostitution, but then they just pulled.
They didn't. Pulled the rug out under us a little bit.
Yeah. And it's this other thing that most people don't think is that horrible.
Right. Yeah. I agree. It was a strange encounter.
And I guess it was just to introduce that character.
I think so.
The sister.
And the dynamic between the two.
And I imagine that sister, given what we find out later about the city manager, Casper, there might be some connection there.
Right.
I suppose.
If we've jumped to this many inorganic connections this early, then yes.
Yeah. Now the second crazy coincidence happens with this character, with Annie's character. So she goes. I don't know if there's a scene in between, but then they go to
eventually
a farmhouse.
They're just delivering papers for foreclosure.
Yeah. So their next task for the day is and they come into this house, and to deliver this foreclosure, and then the woman talks about her missing sister.
Right. Apropos of nothing, really.
Right. It really has nothing to do with the foreclosure.
Yeah.
Now, did you think, before we go on there, was there anything odd to you about this foreclosure and the way they set it up?
I was trying to look for something that made it relevant to...
Oh, I don't think it's relevant at all.
Yeah, the previous scenes or their previous work.
Right. But they're sheriff. I mean, maybe it's sort of setting up. They do.
I guess so. Do sheriffs deliver foreclosures? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. All right.
I think the sheriff in most places is the one who actually kicks someone out of a foreclosed property when it's time to do that.
Right. That sounds like a terrible job, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll come back. There'll be another foreclosure scene later in it. Maybe that relates to the real estate.
There's a foreclosure thread to this whole thing?
Maybe.
Perhaps.
But what I thought was weird about it was the two shots. There was the one shot of the husband, presumably, who was sort of passed out and his wife beat her.
Right.
And in the foreground, there were prescription drugs.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And then, the empty prescription drug bottles or whatever.
Right.
And then there was another shot of the kids playing video games on a huge...
I think it was enormous.
It was enormous, state-of-the-art
It was
TV.
Almost like they were baiting me to ask, like, if you can afford this TV, why can't you pay your mortgage?
Right, exactly.
As though I cared.
Right.
I don't want to care.
And it comes right
that.
after the shot where it shows you why they're being foreclosed upon. Like, they're giving you the reason, like, he's got medical bills.
Right,
and can't work.
And also, look at this giant TV.
But the money they do have, it's sort of like, do
I sympathize or judge?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
So yes, we get the details from this woman that her sister has gone missing, or they haven't seen her for a month.
And then we have the second
major coincidence,
which is what?
That her last place of employment was this New Age commune of sorts that is, in fact, run by... I don't know if it's run by her father, created by her father.
He's the guru of this place.
He's the guru of the place.
And would you like to take a stab at pronouncing this place? Because I don't have it handy in front of me. I don't know if you do.
Oh, God.
It's named after a Greek city, or an ancient Greek city.
Yeah, I have it here somewhere.
I think I do, too.
She says it really fast. Twice. This rolls off her tongue.
Well, it's so weird that he says, the woman says to her, like, she worked at this institute.
Right.
And she immediately
goes to it. I mean, it's L.A. There's got to be a million institutes that claim that use Reiki and massaging of auras, etc. Like, how many phony institutes must exist?
I don't know.
In Southern California, and yet, man nails it straight away. Have you found it yet? Why don't I have this written down?
No, I don't. I can't find it. Maybe. Oh wait, maybe I have brought it up. Hold on. There we go. Panticapaeum.
No, that doesn't sound right.
Panticapaeum.
There you go. Panticapaeum.
Panticapaeum Institute.
Right.
And it's named after this ancient Greek city.
Right. Which, at least there's continuity there.
Yeah, obviously the guru of this place, who turns out to be her father.
Greek mythology and
again,
philosophy.
So she goes and talks to her father at the Capam Institute.
Right.
And the missing girl seemes irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's really another... it's a character development.
Right, yeah. Another thing where I'm... this is one of the potential dangers of a show like this, I think, is that you're always looking for clues that become relevant later, whether they be symbolic or relate to plot or character development. And so you think, again, this issue of like red herrings does somehow this woman's disappearance relate back to the larger tale that will be told through the course of this season, or is it just a way to get us from where we're at to Rachel McAdams' character interacting with her father? I just don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It's there's just no way to know whether that's relevant at all. But it's again, we have this character development now, and what I was going to say about that is, after I watched this episode, because I was a little frustrated with the episode,
right?
Didn't quite, wasn't as excited about it as season 1,
right?
And so I went back and I watched season 1, or at least the first 15 minutes of season 1, episode 1,
right?
Afterwards, and that's one of the things that they say right away, like Matthew McConaughey's character, Russ Cole.
Yep.
From the first season, he points out, like, you never know what the thing is that's going to blow a case wide open. That's why he takes so many notes.
Right.
So he's sort of forcing us into the mode of detective of taking lots of notes.
Right. Okay.
Trying to figure it out.
Yep. Okay.
So I think
Fair enough.
By design, there's going to be tons of things,
right,
little needles that don't mean anything that seem significant.
Sure.
But it can be a little frustrating as a device for storytelling.
Right. So what did you think of the interaction between Annie and her father?
I don't know.
We find out the information that her mother is dead.
Yeah.
Right. Walked into a river?
Committed suicide, I guess.
Right.
Which Antigone's mother in the play does, I think.
Okay.
I think her, that seems weird. Like, name your daughter Antigone and then your wife kills herself later.
Right. We would almost have to force her towards that. I mean, if you're going to engineer things, your reality, she has to kill herself.
Right. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of that scene at this point.
Here's something that the guru, I just labeled him as Guru Dad. I don't remember his name.
That's great. I don't want to necessarily know his name.
Yeah, I don't care. But he says, the last thing that he says when he's guruing, preaching, I don't know what gurus use what verb they use to describe them talking at people. But he says, this is how we must live now in the final age of man. This idea of living as both the world is significant and the universe is uncaring and isn't interested in our presence at all, which I think speaks to this writer-creator's attitude towards at least the worlds that he's creating in general. Is that this is the final age of man, and it's apparently it's terrible, very dystopian view of the world.
Exactly. Very, very cynical. Or
yeah.
I mean, he would probably say, like, the character of. I mean, I feel like the character who most clearly voiced his point of view was probably Matthew McConaughey's character from the first season.
Right.
He probably was very much in tune with that character.
Sure.
I think.
And we get a little bit of that from Colin Farrell's character, Velcoro. I mean, he's got a quote, too, where he says, astronauts don't even go to the moon anymore, as he's speaking into his voice recorder. Everything's fake. Like, nothing delivers. Astronauts don't even go to the moon anymore.
Right.
So what does anything else happen to Annie in this episode prior to that last scene? Because I think we want to wait to get to that final scene. I don't think so.
Remember anything big happening to her after that.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, maybe we'll think of something, but I don't know. Don't think so. So who do we want to talk about next? We want to talk about the Chip Woodruff?
Yeah, sure.
Whatever his name is.
Paul Woodrug. You want to...
What? Can I call him a Chip?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Because the motorcycle cop.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, do you remember? You're a little younger than me.
Yeah, no, I remember Chips.
All right.
Yeah, sure. I watched it.
Okay. So he's a motorcycle cop.
Yep.
California Highway Patrol.
Yep.
And we see him going down the highway.
Pulls over a stunning actress.
Yes, a very attractive young blonde woman.
Who has a ankle bracelet on.
Right.
Suggesting that she's currently on parole or house arrest or something of the kind. Driving recklessly. Right.
And here's one of those vague things about the episode, which I'm not sure I like or not, is... So they have that... well, maybe it's not. I don't know. Tell me, did he go get a blowjob from that girl?
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did either, but it's vague.
Right, it's vague. And then how within a day's time... Because I'm assuming this is happening from the time from when he pulls over the woman in the red convertible to the point where he's pulled into his superior's office and put on leave has to be within the same day. Don't you think?
Yeah.
And who exactly reported it?
Well, this is the thing. I just figured it out. It took me a while to put it together. Like, why? Here's why it has to be that he didn't do it. Why else would the actress bring it up? Like, apparently she's filed a complaint against him.
Okay, all right.
So he refused, gave her the ticket.
Yeah.
And then she,
accuses
in an effort
him
to get out of it or to get it quashed, accuses him of soliciting a blowjob.
Right.
The reverse of what happened.
Right. Okay.
I think that's what happened.
All right. Fair enough. I mean, that's sufficient explanation for me.
So he leaves. He's pissed off.
Right.
He's on leave. And then I guess the next thing we see him do is go to his girlfriend's, or presumably his girlfriend's.
Right.
His lover.
Right. Does that word ever make you uncomfortable? Lover, as a description of two adults who are engaged in some kind of physical relationship.
Does it sound like I'm uncomfortable with the word?
Why would you hesitated before delivering it? I think you had a little bit of a smirk when you said lover.
Well, I think it's indeterminate what she is to him.
That's true.
You know, he's obviously he's never stayed over at her apartment.
Right.
Which she says. She suspects him of sleeping with other women.
Right.
Which we don't have any evidence of yet.
Yeah. So he goes into the bathroom when he first gets there. She
wants to have sex.
She wants to have sex right away. He says, "I gotta go shower." Goes into the bathroom. We learn two major things about him during that time. Right. One is that he's taking Viagra. Is that what I'm? He takes a blue pill, and then he looks at his watch.
Oh.
And then he sits down.
I did not remember the blue pill.
Yeah. So,
because I was too focused on his
burns.
Burn, yeah.
Right.
He has a shoulder that's very burnt up.
Right. Yeah, and his side. So like all on his left arm, shoulder, and side. But he takes a blue pill and then he sits on the toilet and looks at his watch. I think it was meant to be Viagra. I think he was waiting for it to kick in.
Okay, that makes sense.
He has erectile dysfunction issues. He has performance issues.
Right, and he doesn't want to admit that because he's a young guy.
Right, exactly.
And so he then gets in the shower. He comes out and gets a blowjob.
Well, I think who knows.
I mean, when we cut to later, she's still wearing all of her clothes.
Well, maybe she just got dressed again.
That doesn't happen. I don't know. I don't think. You know, when people get naked, they stay naked.
Yeah, I guess for the most part.
Yeah.
All right. I like to think other things happened as well.
Well, in some ways, this might be a good time to sort of talk about like how this first episode of this season, in a way, feels a bit like a reaction to last season.
Sure.
In terms of women, so in the last season, the first season, the person they're hunting is a sadistic killer of women. There's a lot of violence against women.
There's a lot of explicit sex.
Yes, and in which arguably is much more objectifying of the women who are involved in the sex than the men. And And there's no, outside of like girlfriends or victims, there's no real female characters in season 1.
Right.
So in this season, we have
a protagonist that is female.
One of the protagonists is a female. We've got the girlfriend of Vince Vaughn, or wife of Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
We've got sprinkling of other characters like the defense, not the defense, the custody lawyer, which we'll get back to. I think.
Right.
So, there's an effort to put females in the... But then at the same time...
We also have some revelations early on from Valcoro about sexual violence.
Sure. So there's sexual violence in the background still.
Right, yeah.
They're using the trope
We have sex workers.
Yeah, it's sort of... It's softened or something,
Right.
Maybe... But it's still problematic, I feel like.
Right, I think so too.
And this would be, I think this would be an example of it, or maybe an example of how they're trying to deal with it. It's like we see his naked ass in that scene,
right?
But she's not naked,
right?
She doesn't, she doesn't actually
disrobe entirely.
She doesn't disrobe. Yeah, there's no nudity on her part.
Right.
But
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. So then
I don't know what to make of that yet.
I don't know.
It's too early to really say what that.
So afterwards we find out that he hasn't stayed over, and he lies and says that he has some side work to do, even though he's now on leave. And he just goes and gets on his motorcycle and drives his motorcycle super fast.
Right. Which makes me dislike him intensely.
Right.
I felt really like, I don't like you now.
Yeah.
I didn't have any reason to dislike you yet.
Sure. He's going like 100 miles an hour. He's on I don't know LA very well, but like
kind of a curvy highway.
Those curvy highways by the ocean, right? Isn't that where he's at? And then I'm happy to suspend my disbelief while watching television and film. But he turns off his headlamp for what feels like a good 10 seconds.
Right.
Which I've done something like that in a car.
Mm-hmm.
In a rural setting
with a straight road, probably.
With a straight road,
yeah,
right. But a curvy road on a motorcycle, and then the fact that he's going 100 miles an hour, and then he recovers out of like a weird slide. I'm like, nah, man, that guy's dead.
Now, have you ever ridden a motorcycle?
I have.
Have you ever driven one?
Yeah.
So I got my motorcycle license a few years ago as an adult.
You did?
Yes, and I laid it down.
Almost immediately?
Almost immediately. Yeah. Like the first time I was practicing with the bike I bought, I laid it down in a parking lot, going like 5 miles an hour. And still injured myself.
That doesn't classify as laying it down, Kevin. That's just it falling over. It just fell over. You didn't have enough inertia to keep
I had enough inertia. That was the point.
Right.
I was something about I was turning and I meant to hit the brake and I accelerated.
Yeah, they're scary, man. They're scary.
Yeah, maybe this is... I feel like this is part of the weird dynamic maybe of the show, is that we are the kind of men who have no reference for this world that he's setting up. Like, I could never write this show convincingly, I think.
Right.
Without a ton of investigation, because it's just these guys are so...
Well, he's writing generalizations and tropes, so I think I could totally write it. I just can't empathize.
That's right. They're totally different than our life experience.
Right. Yeah. I rode my dad's motorcycle in the parking lot of a high school, and I took it on the city streets a little bit. This is a small town. I didn't feel comfortable.
No,
I didn't like it.
They're scary as hell.
Super scary.
I couldn't get past it.
And you can get going really fast, really quickly.
Right.
And I just don't think it's a good idea.
So I totally. It made me irritated with him. It made me so irritated with him that he did this. We did skip over one thing. There was another scene with him. There was something else that happened. Oh no! I know what we skipped over. There was there's something that they keep hinting at that I wanted to He seems that he's been to Iraq. I think he was specifically served in Iraq.
Yeah, they say the army, but I don't remember. They say the branch, but I don't remember if they say where he served.
Well, remember the montage where they're going back and forth. the newspaper articles come out about corruption,
right?
And that comes up in his sort of exit interview or his suspension interview.
Yeah, and don't worry about anything. And then there's this reference to Black Mountain.
Black Mountain. So, and I assume Black Mountain was maybe a contractor, that he was a contractor.
Sure, right.
Maybe he was in the army, then he went back to Iraq as a contractor, and that's where he got his injury. That's my guess.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
And but obviously he has some sort of form of PTSD.
Right.
I'm guessing he is sort of he's a shell shock guy. And it probably has little to do with his police work. It has to do with his military.
Was it Blackwater that was the prime military contractor?
They were the
non-military contractor that was providing security services.
Well, that's the most
during the Iraq War.
Well known.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I think that's what they're trying to reference.
I think. I think you're right.
Either that or it's a World of Warcraft reference, but I don't think so.
Yeah. Again, that would be coming from that
would become my expertise.
Your expertise and life experience, and that's not what's being written.
Anyway, so that brings us again. That pretty much when he skids and then recovers from the skid, he sees
brings
something.
Us to this final scene,
which we'll get
come
back around to,
loop around to.
So, should we talk about Vince Vaughn's character and Colin Farrell's character at the same time?
I want to talk about Colin Farrell's. Farrell's character, I think, is the low hanging fruit here.
Sure. Let's talk about. I feel like Vince's character we can just sort of talk
quickly
about as we. Well, we'll hit him
Loop
as we go through Colin Farrell's character. So Colin Farrell is Dad of the Year. The best dad you could ever want.
Right.
That's what we learned from the first scene, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he seems like a really good dad in that first scene.
He does. He's
being supportive. He has some degree of emotional intelligence, given that he can recognize that his son is struggling a bit, doesn't want to go to school.
Right.
I mean, I guess he expressly states, when is this over? But yes, he identifies that the kid is struggling, that perhaps he's being picked on, tells him to hold his head up, keep that chin up, kind of nonsense.
Right, yeah. He seems like a good dad. Now, the other thing that's very painfully obvious is that either the kid is terribly miscast or it's not his biological son.
Right,
which
we find out
in the
next episode. Or, next scene, not episode.
Next scene, that's probably the case.
Right, correct.
Because we don't need to go on. If you saw the episode, it's pretty, and you didn't pick that up, then you're
right. You're an idiot.
You're an idiot. Like, you didn't pick up that wasn't his biology. But it does bring up something about the show that so far, I feel like, even though it's a show where there's a lot of red herrings and such, I feel like I'm one step ahead of the show constantly.
Right.
Where their show is something that they think is kind of cagey. Like the kid doesn't look like him.
Right.
And I'm already jumping ahead saying this
isn't his child.
Probably isn't his child, and it turns out to be the case.
Well, what I was thinking during that first scene in the car is that that same scenario can be played for comedy in the context of could be played for comedy in the context of comedy. Like the dad who has a son who maybe is willfully ignorant of the fact that this is not his biological child.
I guess
that his
so.
wife is running out on him, and then it gets
revealed
not
within
somehow.
The context of rape, though.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like in that first scene, we don't know that though. We don't know why. What are the circumstances?
Yeah, he could be adopted. He could be,
But then we get to the scene between Ray Velcoro and the attorney.
Yeah.
And it just felt like that detail of his wife was brutally beaten and raped, and that this child was the product of that awful experience. I was just did we? I was like, do we need this?
Well, it's interesting.
It is interesting.
I think it's interesting.
And it happens. And I'm sure it happens.
Of course. And I think that what the sort of psychological thing we would assume is that a child that was born of rape or conceived of rape, that often the parents who raise them have complicated feelings for
Absolutely,
them.
right.
And so it seems at the beginning he doesn't have complicated feelings, that he feels very sympathetic to him, and he's like, he really wants to be this kid's father and stuff.
Right.
Now, one thing about here's the thing that really was like, what the fuck in that scene with the lawyer. He bribes his own lawyer.
Well, yeah.
Is that what I'm...
No, he's not bribing.
He pulls out a huge wad of money and pushes it across the table.
Right.
Like, do something about this.
Right. I think...
What is he going to...
I think all he's saying is, like, here's a bunch of money, I'm paying you. And then when he says, you have a problem, you like paying taxes? I think all he's saying is, I will pay you under the table. I'll pay you in cash.
I pay you in illegally gotten cash.
Right, but that's never...
I guess
happen.
So. All right.
You know, she's got to report her income.
True.
I don't know.
Well,
it didn't. Yeah. And at the time, we didn't know it was illegally gotten either.
Well, we can assume.
I guess so. Dirty cop.
Dirty cop.
Everybody's dirty cops.
They're all dirty cops in this show, to one degree or another. Okay, so we think he's Dad of the Year. We see a flashback. They use the same convention from season 1, which is that in the past, people are clean shaven. You didn't put that together?
Yeah, that's true. Because totally.
In the present, he's
clean shaven and a recent but bad haircut.
Right, exactly.
It's
which
not
is probably a wig.
Haircut.
It's probably a wig.
Yeah, well, they could cut that wig better.
So he goes back in time. We go back in time. He meets Vince Vaughn, who coincidentally looks exactly the same in the past and now.
He does.
Just a different suit.
Right.
Vince Vaughn tells him apparently who the rapist is
and where
to find him. I think we can gauge that he did something terrible to him. If he didn't, probably killed him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now the cop did, Velcaro.
Right, which I think is there's another. He says during the interview with the attorney, "I welcome judgment," which I think is just an interesting thing. He
denies that they ever caught him.
Yeah, that there's anything, and I just think that, like, the sentence. I think there's certain Easter eggs. In terms of,
I think that's true, that he does want to be caught and punished for what he's done and what he's doing.
Even though he's saying, he is welcoming judgment. Yeah. So through the course of this, I imagine he will be welcoming judgment. He will be judged.
He will be judged.
There will be judging.
Now, here's right away, Vince Vaughn's character. I don't know. It's something about. Here's my basic take on Vince Vaughn's character, is that I think either Vince Vaughn was miscast, or he's just not clicking into. He could do this character, but he's just not clicking into it.
Yeah, and I was really excited that Vince Vaughn was going to be playing this kind of role. Did you see Clay Pigeons with Vince Vaughn? He plays a psychopath. Mm-hmm. It comes on the heels of Swingers.
Okay.
So late 90s. But I enjoyed the film, and I thought it showed that he was capable of playing this kind of character. I thought that the language was just so clunky.
Well, that was part of it. It was hard for him to click into the language. I mean, his first line was, "This filth hurt your woman."
Right.
And it just sounded so stilted. And he has a lot of lines like that are grammatically a little off.
Well, how about this line? I wrote this down because it's so awkward. Sometimes everybody is not always on the same side.
Yeah.
And it's chock full of adverbs. What is this language is terrible.
But I don't think it's terrible language. I think it's evocative of an accent or a dialect that he's not aware of.
What is it alluding to? What dialect is it alluding to?
But I'm imagining like a working class, low level mobster kind of guy,
right?
That could pull this off. Like, I feel like, I don't know.
Doesn't it feel like it's attempting to evoke something that's more New York than more East Coast than West Coast?
Maybe
in that
maybe
in a way. I understand what you're saying, but it
evocative
wasn't effective.
Of something to me that is just not nailing. And I also think, I feel like he's trying to play everything very small on purpose, sort of playing against type.
Yeah.
And I feel like the character was written to type more. Does that make any sense?
Like,
he was trying to whatever, the showrunner is trying to write a character that is passionate or is rough with a very thin veneer of polish, right?
Yeah,
and Vince Vaughn is just too polished in this role at
the
moment.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that he in those first couple scenes that he is distinctly part of the criminal element and transitioning. And one could argue that these two worlds don't live very far apart to the legitimate world of business.
Right. Like the plotting of it makes sense to me.
Sure.
But something about the way he's gelling with the character. Anyway, so that's Vince Vaughn. And so he obviously that's the sort of beginning of this cop's downfall. He goes off and presumably kills the rapist that we assume. Now, we don't even know if that information was true.
We don't.
It could be that he gave him just information of somebody he wanted killed.
Right, which I was thinking as he was giving him that information.
Right. It could be totally bogus information.
Right.
So, I don't know, what's the next thing we see with... I guess the next thing we see with him is the beginning of the investigation. Oh, there's one other thing. Let's talk about this with Vince Vaughn. Here's one other thing that I thought was just really funny to me. So one of the next scenes with Vince Vaughn is he's talking to
his wife
in
the bathroom, like when he's getting ready for the meeting. She's putting his...
Oh, we can talk about that. No, I'm thinking about when his assistant hands him the newspaper.
Right. Yeah.
And we find out about this journalist.
That whole scene is amazing.
So he hands him the newspaper. He immediately says, "An 8-part series?" Now I froze the picture of the newspaper.
Right.
It doesn't say that anywhere.
Like part
on the
one of.
It doesn't say part one of 8. He doesn't say part 1 at all.
Right.
So how he immediately knows that it's an 8-part series.
He also delivers one of the best lines of the entire episode, which is "Never do anything out of hunger, not even eating."
Right. Again, I feel like if that was delivered by Tony Soprano,
right? Yeah,
you would totally buy it.
There was something about the
never do anything out of hunger,
not even eating.
Exactly. But Vince he's
and
playing against it.
Cut to the corner and there's like a lady with a hairnet just stirring a pot of a sauce.
Yeah. And I think that's what he's trying to do with his character, and they're just not. Vince didn't want to do that.
Yeah, I feel like so a lot of this episode or this series looks like it's going to be. There's elements of pulp, certainly.
Sure.
There's stylistic things that remind me a little bit of things like Sin City. I thought a lot about Killer Joe while I was watching this.
Yeah.
Which is a Tracy Letts.
Yeah, I've seen the movie.
Play adapted into the film with Matthew McConaughey in it, where there's language and violence used to affect, and it's in a pulpy way. And I feel like, I think things need to be turned up a little bit.
I totally agree, especially with Vince Vaughn's character.
Right. I think some of it reads a little bit absurd, but I would consider it more of a stylistic choice if it was even more absurd.
Right.
Whereas now it feels sometimes just kind of clunky and dare I say hacky at times. Like that line, if read in a certain way, or if the language was more consistently that stylistic, then I would be like, okay, I'm totally on board. But as is, it's sandwiched between things that just don't come off the tongue very nicely.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it does with that character. I'm not sure I need everything to be more hyper absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, like some of the coincidences and maybe like if this was the Coen brothers doing this,
sure, right? Exactly.
Like the Guru would be a lot more fun. I feel like,
yeah.
And I guess there are these absurd touches, like the green wig that the sister wears was so like what?
Yeah.
What green?
Or the character, the guy that plays, I don't know who's running the webcam business.
Sure.
He's a little bit shady.
Right.
Maybe a touch too shady for what's actually going on.
Right.
I just make him shadier.
Right. Possibly. Yeah.
I don't know. So what do we see next from Frank?
Well, he investigates so we have the missing city manager, which I was having a lot of trouble figuring out. Like, obviously, it fits into Vince Vaughn's plans. He needs the city manager for some reason.
Right.
He keeps on saying he needs Casper. I didn't catch at first that this was the city manager.
There's also the city manager, right?
And so this is the missing city manager.
Yep.
He's also, obviously, as we move on, we figured out long before the wallet is revealed that this must be the guy.
Yeah.
That's being transported in
the back of that car.
In the back of that car. They go over to the guy's house.
Yes. Oh my God, this is so great.
And this scene, this is maybe one of those scenes where it is totally like over the top.
Right. Way over the top.
So they go into this house, and immediately it's like,
and by they we mean Ray Velcoro
and some dopey cop
and dopey guy that he gets
dopey
saddled
cop
with.
that I'm guessing we're not going to see much of.
Right. Terribly dressed. Could you be that? I mean, really, can you be a detective and be that badly dressed?
Well, my favorite thing is when he uses the police code 207.
And he's like, what?
Just so that he can...
he can say a kidnapping.
Yeah, I feel like they realize, well, we need to explain what 207 is, so we need to make this cop dumb. And that just retroactively...
They work backwards from
exactly.
there. Exactly. That was the detail that set in motion this guy's character.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they go into the city manager's house, Casper's house. Mm-hmm. And it's absurdly erotic. Right?
Perverted, I would say perverted.
Right. So
there's crazy artwork on the
lots of dildos and...
Lots of dildos.
Loads of dildos. Of all shapes and sizes and colors. And this is the...
What's your favorite detail? By the way, I have 3 favorite details.
Okay, well, I mean, the detail that struck me as the strangest is when they first walk in, and the camera cuts to a naked woman floating in a white liquid.
Like milk.
But the way that it's shot, I'm thinking that's a full-size person.
It did almost look real.
Yeah, it looked very real. It looked like a real woman floating in a giant pool of milk. And then he says, do you see that? Right? Does he ask him? And then the next shot is like further into the house, back onto the dopey cop looking at like a silver bowl that's on a table, like an idiot, just staring at like an idiot. He doesn't reply. And Velcoro keeps moving. I was just like, what did I see? What did you show me? What was I supposed to take from that? It was so odd.
Yeah, that was an odd shot, certainly, because it was so. It just doesn't ring a bell,
right?
Like he plays with little Barbie dolls and milk and bowls of milk. It doesn't.
I don't know what it's.
Whereas, here are my favorite 3 things in that apartment.
Yeah,
is they show several paintings, but there's one painting that they show, I think as they're going upstairs to the second floor, and it's like just a collection of legs and arms on a bed, and I looked at it very carefully, and I could not make sense of what the 2 bodies were supposed to be doing. Oh,
sure, yeah, it was like a BDSM
kind of, but it was just like 2 bodies mashed together with limbs sprawled out in all different directions, and I really couldn't make sense of what it was.
Yeah.
Then the thing that I thought, they're not going to top this. It's the bronze dildo woman. It looks like a bottom of a woman with a top just being a dildo penis. Okay. In bronze, that's a paperweight.
Okay, I don't know if I saw it.
Oh my god, you gotta look for that. And then my last favorite detail is the skeleton in the sort of shroud.
Oh sure, yeah, absolutely.
I didn't get that one at all. Like, how does that play into his kinky sex games? I don't know.
Right, it seemed like something that was captured from a sunken pirate ship.
Well, you know what it reminds me of? It's sort of like the foreclosure scene. I feel like whoever is doing the set dressing has too much money or something. Right. Like they're just going for it. They're really going for the set dressing and trying to tell information, get information across storytelling wise, with all just too many things going on.
Right. Well, and they didn't do any policing while they were in there. I mean, clearly, like, things are torn and broken. And when you walk around and I guess I'm just used to... I mean,
they just got to the point where it's like, this obviously something happened here and we need to call this in.
Right. Don't you do a little bit of speculating? I don't know.
Well, they speculated that he was kidnapped. It seems like a kidnap.
207.
207.
It's 207.
There's a 419.
Is that called out? Is that a call out at
in
some
season 1, episode 1, they do a similar thing. And I think there's another code later. Doesn't he phone in a code?
Maybe. I need codes to really get invested.
Yeah.
If I'm going to believe that these actors who I know are not cops in real life are cops.
That's the way you convince you?
That's the way you convince me. Lots of codes.
So, okay. So we got to finish up talking about Colin Farrell's character. So, I think the next time we see him, he's getting drunk, right?
Yeah. Which comes out of nowhere for me.
He's getting drunk. Now, they do say earlier, that Vince Vaughn's character says, don't worry about it, we'll get Velcoro to take care of it.
Right.
In reference to the journalist.
Yeah, that's true.
And so he's sitting there, he's in what's one of the more iconic images of there. He gets drunk, he gets out of the car, puts on his ski mask, goes up and kicks the shit out of the journalist in the journalist's apartment. And then you see that shot of him putting his finger to his lips so the junkie doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
Which...
Whatever, right?
Whatever. So he beats the crap out of him, and then, which is bad enough.
Right.
And we can talk maybe about how
ill-advised that is.
That's a terrible plan.
Right.
I feel like that's a terrible plan.
I think it is too.
I don't know.
Yeah, wouldn't you... there are so many more nuanced ways to
threaten somebody.
Yeah, or not even threaten the journalist, but... He has the mayor in his pocket, right? Frank does?
Yeah, I suppose. The mayor's at the party.
Right. So can't the mayor then put some pressure on an editor?
I don't
or something
know,
like that?
I mean,
you have to go directly to the... Anyway.
I just think it's sort of like the idea that it would silence a journalist. I'm sure there would be some journalists, but it just seems like that's just meat. Like a journalist waits their whole life to be...
Sure. Beaten up.
Kind of like to get a story that's so important that it'd be worth somebody to kill him.
Right.
Does that make any sense? Like there's some sort of reverse psychology here that they're not getting, that this is going to backfire. Like he's going to go into, especially if he seemed like a loner.
Yeah.
Whatever. He seemed like he lived alone. So to me, it made me think, oh, this guy is going to go into hiding.
Right.
Also, it's 2015 or maybe it's 2014 or 13 or whatever, presumably.
Right.
You mentioned this when we were talking about this before the show. One file is just a file on his laptop.
Right.
I mean, this is 2015. Like people,
right? Everything's backed up. Everything's on servers.
Everything's on the cloud.
Right.
If he was doing work and writing, he's probably got versions of these stories that are already.
They're not
in
capturing
the newspapers.
really anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it would delay the story for a couple of days, maybe. It may, but he still has access to his Gmail account, or he's still got access to almost all the information. There's no way that this really stops the story.
Yeah. So he takes a laptop and some physical files.
Yes.
Like some manila envelopes and
like it's 1983.
Right. And he takes
without laptops.
Right. And then he takes that to a bar where Frank
Right.
Is
in the most conspicuous meeting between a cop and a gangster.
Right. Yeah.
Very public.
How'd you feel about the? So there doesn't seem to be anyone in this bar or club, and then we've got a musical performance.
Mm-hmm.
That reminded me of, and we talked about this a little bit beforehand. There's some Lynchian elements to this for me, and that very much conjured a lot of scenes from
Blue Velvet.
Yeah, Blue Velvet or
Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, I think probably everything he does has some scene where a woman does a really breathy, evocative sad.
Yeah. I feel like we could do like a half hour just on the lyrics of that song and also the opening song.
Right.
But nobody really wants to hear
Twin
us
Peaks.
talk.
There's a bunch of Twin Peaks
talk about the
scenes like that as well. But anyways, so he drinks heavily. He hands over this.
Like he's drinking too heavily too. Like it's like cartoonishly heavy.
Right.
Yeah, that's just an enormous amount of alcohol.
Now did we skip then?
Oh, we skipped the most important character detail the whole fucking episode. So he goes to school. He sees his son. He gives him a
sleeping bag.
He's apparently a week late.
Right. Notices that the shoes that he bought for him, LeBron James Nikes, are gone. The stepdad tells him, some kids took him and cut him up.
Right.
So he shakes down his own child.
Threatens his own child to get the information. And then tracks down the actual kid, goes to his family. I thought he was going to beat the kid in front of his father at first.
Right, yeah.
Which would be even worse.
Right. But the alternative is pretty insane as well.
Yeah. So he beats the kid's father in front of him. Now, this is interesting about talking about being one step ahead again.
Right.
In the very first scene, when that kid said some snotty things to his son, I thought, Jesus, he's going to beat the crap out of that kid.
Right.
Like, that's what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
So when it actually kind of did, I was like, what?
Right. And then, again, some of the lines in this episode are just bonkers. So he says, "You bully anybody again, I will come back and butt-fuck your father with your mother's headless corpse on this lawn."
Yeah, that's bonkers.
That's just an insane thing to say, and doesn't make very much sense.
Now, are we to believe he gets away with this? I mean, obviously, it could happen in episode 2 or 3 where it comes back.
I think he will, unless this is part of I Welcome Judgment, and all of this stuff is just going to pile up.
I guess
at least karmically.
I guess also we're to believe that had he not been drunk in the first place from beating up the journalist, he might have reacted differently to his son.
Right, of course, yeah.
Because he was drunk in that moment. But this is a long period before he goes.
Yeah.
Like, he maintains his drunkenness, if that's to blame, for a long time when he does it.
But this is when
he beats him with a...
he's got brass knuckles.
Brass knuckles on.
Yeah, it doesn't seem necessary at all.
No.
The guy doesn't see it coming. I think you could just punch him in the face.
You could just punch him and kick him a couple times. And
right.
Still frighten the crap out of the kid.
Right.
Totally
like there's elements, those moments are just so, like that line of dialogue is just so campy. It's so much camp, which I feel like wasn't so much there for me in season 1. It didn't feel as campy.
It feels a little different. It's a different tone, different tone from season 1. And so now we find out this guy. At this point, I feel like I don't know if I've lost interest in Colin Farrell's character, but...
Right.
I mean, he's so... It just feels so
absurd.
Awful.
Yeah.
I just don't like him at all. I'm not really sure who I'm supposed to be rooting for at all in this, if anybody. I guess that's maybe a stupid question, but...
Right.
But you kind of need characters that you're curious... Like, I'm not curious about him anymore. He's just an asshole.
Right.
I don't... we're supposed to believe this is set off by somebody raping his wife 8 years ago, but nobody changes that much. He had to be a jerk to begin with.
Right.
And
even if he's suffering and doing some destructive things, I want them to be mostly personally destructive. Mm-hmm. I want them to be destructive for his own life and his own health. But once he just starts beating the shit out of some guy.
Yeah, some guy who he's just met, whose
kid is an asshole.
His kid is an asshole and did something that's... his kid didn't... it was bad. I would be really angry with somebody if they did that to my kid.
Yeah.
But he didn't injure the child.
Right.
He didn't, put him in the hospital.
Right.
He destroyed the kid's shoes.
Yeah.
Which is bad, but
right.
I don't know. It's so out of... obviously that we're supposed to be in this position at this point. We're supposed to very much dislike him, or I don't know if dislike is the right word, but just know that the whole purpose of that scene, in part, I think, is just to realize this guy is a bad dude.
Right.
He's not a good guy.
Sure.
But I think we know that from the journalist thing is bad enough.
Yeah. At least that feels like, at least he's getting paid for that. There seems to be a clear motivator.
Sure. I guess so. Yeah.
I mean, it's a terrible thing to do.
It's a terrible thing. It's terrible on both on the level of like morally and strategically.
Yeah.
It's a terrible idea.
Right.
Ugh.
So does that bring us all the way to essentially the end?
Yeah, we can talk about the end now. So the end moment, they find the guy.
Right. Chips finds Casper, the city manager, who's been weekend Bernied from the car.
Exactly the reference I was thinking of.
to the park bench.
Weekend at Casper's.
Weekend at Casper's. He's got sunglasses on. Did you notice that they sitting next to him in the car? Casper early on.
Yeah,
it was the eagle head. It was
the golden eagle head, or maybe
it was
bronze
like
or something.
it was black.
Oh, I thought it was golden.
No, it was black. Yeah. Yep.
No, I think we'll see.
Clearly, obsidian black.
Will thinks it's black.
Right.
Kevin thinks it was golden.
Right.
So if anyone actually listens,
so
to
like
this,
I don't know. Like all of a sudden,
you can tell us who's right.
I was like, is he just going to remake Maltese Falcon from this point forward?
You think that was a Maltese Falcon reference?
I think so.
Anyway, so yeah. So
Chips finds him on the park bench. He's clearly dead.
Called. So why do we think all these characters are being brought together? So there's the cop who found him.
Right. You've got Annie, who might have like geographical.
I think maybe it's where he was found. That makes sense that he was in the county, so that's why Annie and her partner Elvis.
Yep.
I believe his name is Elvis.
I believe so too.
Like why they're brought in, and then he's brought in because it was initially his case, his missing person case.
Correct.
I don't know why the Chip would still be involved though. Why is Chip?
Yeah, other than finding them, if he's
just a witness.
Realistically,
he was off duty.
Yeah, he's on.
He would
leave.
not have any part.
He'd have nothing
going
part.
Forward.
He'd just go home.
It would just be like go.
He'd just ride his motorcycle super fast.
But now we're sort of like we have this super team of damaged cops,
right?
Who are going to solve this crime.
And they, you have the scene that's the equivalent to the slow motion walk, which is just the camera panning. Across like all of their faces, which is supposed to, I imagine, foreshadow that these people will now be in each other's lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the implication is that these people are going to
solve.
Yeah. Well, here's my thought, crime. And I don't know if this is because of some sort of something in the trailers or if this is just my thought. I think Chip is there to be the love interest of Annie.
Maybe so. At some point. Sure.
I think that's maybe what he's there for.
Yeah, I don't know. What happened to the Falcon?
What? What happened to the Falcon? That's the MacGuffin.
I'm interested. Yeah, right.
Well, there's also I don't know if you watched the Next Time On.
I did,
but there's something about Vince's money being gone. What's his actual character name?
Frank.
It's like Frank's money is somehow gone. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
are there any like unanswered questions for you at the end of this?
Well, I mean, there's that opening image.
The opening very image, cryptic. Right?
So it's the wooden stakes with the pink
material
ribbons on it.
What are those supposed to be?
I think that must be on the land.
That's what I was
Frank
thinking.
has cordoned off.
Yeah.
For the California Rail project.
Yeah.
And there is a flash. When I watched it again, there's a flash of a sign that says contaminated.
It does. Yep.
So, I don't, I mean, something about this real estate. It can't just be that he's using money, that ill-gotten money to make this happen. It has to be something else complicated that's some part of cover. I mean, there's all these refinery shots.
Sure.
The obsessive sort of shots of highways and refineries and other kinds of manufacturing kinds of stuff, although none of the characters seem attached to that at all.
Right.
Of course, that was true in the first series, too. There was an awful lot of that kind of imagery, I feel like, refineries and highways and stuff like that.
They just make for interesting B-roll.
I guess so. I don't know if there's anything else. That was the one thing. I mean, we could talk about... Interestingly, one thing about the opening credits. Did not like the opening credits.
You didn't.
But then when I watched it again...
Yeah.
The music started to click for me. And I was like, oh, this isn't so bad.
Okay.
Like, I remember I loved the opening credits from season 1.
Right.
And was disappointed that they didn't use the same music.
Sure.
And
do you know who the artist was for the opening credits?
It's T-Bone Burnett.
Was it a T-Bone song?
Yeah, he did the opening credits for last season and this season.
Yeah, because it ends with the Nick Cave song.
Okay.
But I assumed it was T-Bone Burnett, but I wasn't.
Yeah,
I wasn't certain.
So I think that maybe that's something I should sort of think about because I definitely thought after I watched the episode, I watched the beginning of season 1, episode 1 again, and was immediately enthralled again. Like, oh wow, I really want to know. I want to watch that all over again.
Yeah.
And I'm not feeling that way about this.
Right. Although I have to admit,
intrigued, but...
Yeah, I have to admit that I'm especially interested in creepy backwoods.
The setting of season 1?
Right. Season 1 is really interesting in that sense.
It's a little scarier.
It's way scarier. It's more unnerving than Los Angeles.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Because I am definitely somebody... I've lived in cities most of my adult life. I'm much more unnerved when I'm out in some rural area that I'm not familiar
and then you
with.
find some totem that is just sticks and tied together. I find that anywhere, and I'm freaked out.
Yeah.
So,
but maybe I should give it time because the second time I heard the opening credits, I was like, you know what, this isn't so bad. I liked it a little bit more, and maybe with some familiarity over time, I will be just as interested.
Right. As of now, I'm not super excited for episode 2. I don't know why.
Well, there's, I'm not. I don't think there's a question that I really want answered at this point.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I think there's a lot of little mysteries, and I'm not sure that I either feel like I know the answer to them already, or that they're not.
They tried to tackle a lot. They tried. I mean, that's 4 main characters.
Yeah.
Bringing them together in the course of an hour.
And maybe that's it. They're setting the table. It's sort of like the early episodes in a series of in a season of Game of Thrones. It's like there's a ton of setting the table, and it usually pays off in the last few episodes.
Right. All right, let's get to brass tacks. So what are we going to call this podcast?
Well, I think it's interesting to me the idea that True Detective and that we are put in the position of detective.
Yeah, I don't know why that very obvious point eluded me earlier, but for some reason it did. Like, why are they making me pay attention to all these details? Like, I'm the detective.
You're the detective in the story. Yeah.
How about watching the detectives, and then you can use Elvis Costello and the attractions.
Watching the detectives. That's not bad.
And then you can use that song as the intro.
Okay. I think it's one of those things that I've never figured out. I feel intuitively that's not allowed. Like you're not supposed to use, you're not
No, of course not.
No.
Well, yeah, but until someone says that you can't, you have to license my music, you can't.
True.
How about I will just badly sing Watching the Detectives?
I think that might, if you actually sing it, a version of that with your guitar,
I'll totally do it.
Then that'll be better.
Okay.
That will insulate us a little bit. Because then it will count as a parody.
Yeah.
So Watching the Detectives with Will and Kevin.
Yep.
Great. And so that's we're gonna persevere. We're gonna keep watching.
Right.
I wonder how many people who loved season 1 of True Detectives are gonna keep watching season 2?
Most of them.
You think?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I mean, I didn't quit Orange is the New Black until I got to episode 4 of the new season.
So you're already done with it?
I'm done. I quit.
Okay, you're good to quit. All right. All right, so we'll be back next week. We'll try to get these out by Tuesday morning for each week. And if you have any feedback, let's see, where should we have them send us email? We'll
can they just send physical mail?
They could send physical mail. We're both members of the Under the Gun Theater Ensemble, so in theory, you could look up Under the Gun Theater and send us mail directly.
Yeah, that would be great.
Or you know what? I'll set up an email address called detectives@undertheguntheater.com.
Good thinking.
And if you have any feedback on the show, just send it to detectives@undertheguntheater.com.
Right. Yeah. Or send us a postcard.
Send us a postcard to the
If you
theater.
travel, like if you're traveling right now, just send us.
Or stop by a show. See a show at the theater. Ask for Will or Kevin.
Yep.
And
then deliver your opinions directly to us.
Exactly. All right. That's it, I guess.
All right. Good job, Kevin.
Good job, Will.
All right.